the She Supply Chains podcast. We are so happy to have you here today on this, at least in Minnesota, it's like a beautiful fall morning. And Kathy, where are you located?
So I literally moved to Maryland earlier this year. So I'm
Oh,
experiencing my first fall ever. Well, not ever,
oh,
but I lived in Florida for over 30 years. So
oh,
yeah,
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 no fall.
like this changing of seasons is going to be different to me.
All right.
That's amazing. And so, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, personally and professionally, Kathy?
Sure. I'm Kathy Fulton. I serve as the executive director of American Logistics Aid Network, or we just call ourselves Allen. I've been doing this for, 15 years full time with the organization, and a couple of years as a volunteer before that. Actually, when I joined Allen, I was voluntold. I was actually working, yeah, yeah. I was working in IT for Saddle Creek Logistics, and my boss is like, "Hey, you need a challenge. So this nonprofit is getting started, and they need some IT help." And I actually kind of just fell in love with it. If I don't say it throughout the rest of the conversation, I'll say it now. Like, I have the best job in the world, and I love what I get to do. I mean, there are days that are hassle, but like, I love the people I work with. I love the organizations I get to interact with. So I have a cool job.
Amazing.
Is there a moment where you, like you said, you fell in love with it? Was it a moment? Maybe it was multiple moments. Could you tell us a little bit when you're just like, this is my place. I know I should be here in supply chain.
Yeah. So I'll start with a silly one, which was very early in my career. And I mentioned I worked in IT. And so one day our offices were in the warehouse, basically, looked out over the warehouse. And I walked into my boss's office for a meeting about something other, and he had, I don't know if you guys remember, like those candy dispensers that were shaped like M&Ms,
Yeah.
like
Oh, yes.
it's like those silly ones, and it was yellow. I have no idea why I remember it was yellow, and it had a saxophone or something like that, and it played music. But anyway, so he had these peanut M&Ms, and I'm like, oh, and he's offering me M&Ms, and I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. He's like, yeah, when we finish our conversation, I'll walk you out to the candy aisle of the warehouse. I was like, what? We have a candy aisle? This is like the best job in the world. Uh, so it was actually really that kind of recognition of the stuff that is on our grocery store shelves has to start somewhere, and it has to go through a lot of different places in order to finally get into our homes. And that was like, oh, this is really cool. I can make a difference to make sure people get fed. So that one is kind of silly, but the other moment was early on in my work with Alan. I'd been doing this IT project, and we worked on it all summer. And I was like, guys, I don't think this software is exactly what we need as an organization, or what it wasn't even we at the time. I don't think it's what you need as an organization. I don't think businesses are going to adopt it. I think it's just going to be really, challenging. And then Hurricane Harvey hit down on the Gulf
Mm.
Coast, and they're like, "You're the only person who actually knows how this software works. So tag, you're it." Um, and so we started doing all this coordination, and we're moving food and water and medical supplies and all of these things, and seeing all of these businesses who raised their hand and say, "Yes, I can help," and seeing this work that I had done that I'd been using it to make money for this company, which is great. I think that that's important, but it was in that moment where I was using that to really help people in their moment of need, that it was like, "Ah, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be."
It feels higher purpose.
It really does.
Yeah. Okay, so you've just moved to Maryland, or you're meeting all these new people in your community. How do you describe, like, what is it that you do? What's your
Yeah.
role like?
Yeah, so when my daughter was little, and she's almost 30 now, but when she was little, she would tell people, like, "My mom begs for a living." So, like Okay, honey. Let, let's put some meat on that. But really, my job is to be a connector. It's to enable businesses and individuals who want to do good to do that in the best possible way. It's using helping people use their skills and their assets and their knowledge to make a difference for communities and individuals and families that have just gone through crap,
Mm.
honestly. So it's using that power of logistics to make life better for disaster survivors. I mean, obviously, the job description is a lot longer than that. I wear a lot of different hats around the organization, but ultimately, it's to figure out how logistics and supply chain can really help communities.
Kathy, not many people may be familiar with. Can you talk about the organization's mission, and then what kinds of critical needs do you help during a disaster like Harvey?
Yeah. So, we've had we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
Congrats.
Yeah, it's a little surreal. I mentioned I've been with the organization. It's going on, 17 and a half years at this point. Um, and we've had a number of, mission statements that we've used through the years, like, the power of logistics and, saving lives through logistics. But really, all of those boil down to ensuring that disaster survivors get the resources that they need when and where they need it. That takes logistics and supply chain know-how. And so, the current mission statement we're using is powered by logistics, but guided by purpose, and we're delivering.
Mm.
Yeah, which I love, and then
Yeah.
this tag of delivering resilient disaster relief when and where it's needed most. Um, but again, mission statements are a slice of it, and you hope that they tell enough of the story. Um, but I think we dig down into that into our program areas where we're talking about how identifying the challenges so we know what to solve. Like I come from supply chain, I should be thinking about demand first, right? And so it's identifying those challenges that we want to solve. It's then figuring out the solutions that can help, and then building capacity for our constituents so that we're not relearning the same lessons after every single disaster, and we're not doing the same
Mm.
work after every single disaster. My goal is that, like, if I help a nonprofit once, I'm not just going to help them coordinate that transportation move. We're going to layer that with some education and some knowledge about the industry and some relationships so that okay, you may need to I may need to help you for a little bit of time, but ultimately I want you to be able to do this work yourself. So we're powering not just ourselves, but we're powering the nonprofit community with logistics and supply chain knowledge, and we're using our purpose and their purpose to do good. Um, all of that in the name of delivering that the resilient relief.
So, Kathy, will you be when there is a disaster? Does the government reach out, or does it other nonprofits? Like, how does that? I'm just curious. Like, how does
Oh,
all the coordination work? And like,
yeah.
how do you decide or the when and where? And because you can't be everywhere, and sometimes there's multiple things happening at once. So, how does that all work?
I wish there were like a simple trigger that says you are activated.
It's
Um,
like the bat signal. Like it's time.
right, right.
It's your
Uh,
turn.
yeah, exactly. There's a whole system of variables that we have to look at. Primarily, it's is this event or will this event overwhelm local supply chain capacity?
Hmm.
Um, and that's not always clear. It's not always evident. I'm going to tell a terrible story about myself about a huge what was almost a failure that we turned into good. But like in 2023, when the fires happened in Maui, in Lahaina, our team was talking about it that day, and I'm like, guys, this is a pretty small community. The fires are on an island. It's fairly isolated. There are not a lot of logistics and supply chain nodes there. It's mostly a demand area. I don't think it's gonna be a big deal. I don't think they're gonna need us that much. And then 6 weeks later, I pull out that message just to remind myself and just to humble myself, like, treat
Mm.
every potential event like it's gonna be really bad, because it doesn't matter, really doesn't matter if, a huge warehouse is affected, lives are gonna be affected.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, just to go back and answer your question, yes, absolutely. The government reaches out to us. They're primarily asking about, hey, what's happening in private sector supply chains right now? How do we stay out of their way? What are they going to need that we can help them with? Nonprofits are reaching out to us for similar information, but also, staging their resources, helping them, pre-position items, and then helping with post-disaster movements or warehouse space or whatnot. And then we actually support a lot of different businesses. I don't expect that every business is going to have someone who understands government regulations
Mm.
to the level at which, like, we have to dig into that knowledge. So even right now in South Carolina, they're waiting for this tropical storm or, potential hurricane or whatever it's going to be. And yesterday the state issued an executive order. It was, with a state of emergency, and that means that businesses can now take advantage of hours of service waivers and weight waivers if they're moving resources. So we're also we're helping nonprofits, we're helping government, and we're helping business. Just like, again, how do we use logistics and supply chain? How do we take advantage of every possible capability in order to make sure that disaster survivors get what they need?
So this kind of goes into the next question then. I mean, disaster relief just I mean, as you're talking in my head, I'm thinking about like people getting on highways and trying to flee if they can. Some people are stuck. I think about all the pictures you see on the news afterwards, right? It just feels chaotic and it can definitely be unpredictable too. Like sometimes a path of a storm can drastically change. How do you how do principles of traditional supply chain, like we think about like, oh, we're going to be so efficient. We want to have visibility. We want to have end-to-end connection. Like, how do you apply that to these like really like a very extreme environment?
Yeah. Yeah, what does on time in full mean in a disaster
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Oh, boy. So visibility is really, I'm just gonna, like, I'll talk about that, and then I'll go back to collaboration, because collaboration is key. But visibility is such a tough one for us. And I talk about being demand focused and understanding, the things that a community may potentially need. But that's often unclear because you don't have damage assessments, right? As the
Yeah.
disaster has happened, you don't exactly know what people need. You do what supply chain people do, and you kind of look at historical and you match it up against data, and then you kind of make a guess,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes that actually, for us, we try to err on the side of caution and, support people and make sure that there's stuff there to help. Sometimes not knowing and that lack of visibility and that lack of clarity also causes people to send too much stuff. So,
Oh,
I think,
interesting.
yeah, I think you mentioned, like, people evacuating. We also see the other thing happen where people are like, I want to help. And, it's this raw, raw moment, which is fabulous. But people say, hey, I've got this stuff sitting in the garage or these clothes in my closet. These people just lost everything. Surely they want my old, dirty t-shirt. And yeah, it happens. Some terrible
Yeah.
things. Like, I've been in donation warehouses where there's, these just giant trash bags of stuff. So the communities end up without visibility. They end up having to
Mm.
dedicate time to sorting through supplies that, honestly, 50% of them at least are going to end up in the landfill. Um, and if we had been smart about it from the beginning and said, there's only 10,000 people in this community, so we don't need 15,000 teddy bears, right?
Right.
Um, if we had used some of the resources, the technology, the information available to us ahead of time, things that supply chain professionals know how to do, there'd be a lot less headache. And so, you know, I think about that, and I think about how can we solve that? I'm never gonna capture every soccer mom who wants to do good, right? And
Yes.
I don't want to stop people from doing good, but I want to help direct it in the right way.
Yeah.
And that's what collaboration is about. That's where working, across government and nonprofit and business, and saying, what are the true needs? What is available? What has survived the disaster and is already available in that community? And how do we direct that and leverage that before we think about bringing anything else in?
Yeah, the thing I love about, this Kathy is a couple things. I think probably for most of our listeners, myself included, when you go into supply chain, you don't think about, wow, you can, and we had this with Erica Theme when she talked about Feeding America, but
Yeah.
like you can really leverage your expertise for like a really higher mission and purpose. I love that. And the second thing I love is this good reminder. I tell my daughter this too sometimes and remind myself. Sometimes we want to help people the way that we think that they need our help versus what they've actually asked for or really
Yeah.
need, because that's what's most convenient for us. So I do think that's a good reminder that, um, yeah, just because you have excess of this, that doesn't mean people, what I try to remind myself is regardless of anybody's situation, they probably want it in the same level of quality and care that you like your shirts.
Yeah.
And, it's
Yeah.
like just because they don't have it doesn't mean they want it dirty or not,
Yeah.
so or just, when yes, I just think that's just a good reminder for like all of us as we think about giving and that like I hear these stories of Thanksgiving, the food kitchens, everyone wants to like, okay, that's my part. I did it at Thanksgiving and they can't even take people because of that. But really
Yeah.
making sure and this goes back to our day jobs too, like there's a customer and like what do they want?
What is the actual demand?
What is
Yeah.
the demand? And just trying to force them to take something they don't want is not a it's not a good
Yeah.
model in any
Exactly.
space. So,
Exactly.
I just
So
I love
true.
those, good reminders. Okay, so you talked about this, collaboration, but you have to work with a wide range of partners, and I have to imagine between large corporations, nonprofits, government agencies, they all have unique challenges, and, can you talk about how do you align the supply chain efforts with so many different groups, especially during a crisis when we're moving fast. I think sometimes people thrive in a crisis. Some people, it's like fight or flight or freeze. So like, how do you think about working across all those different groups in an efficient, seamless way?
Yeah. Um, so I am probably incredibly naive with this, but I'd like to think that after this long, I have a little bit of perspective. I think ultimately everybody wants the same thing in disaster. They want to help survivors. Now, there are different approaches across sectors for how that they may, you know, try to do that, how they may try to help. We actually have this very fun disaster simulation game where we tell people, okay, now you're a government person, now you're a business, now you're a nonprofit, and they have to figure out how to actually get resources to disaster survivors. And I tell them, I want you to be the biggest caricature of the government person you can think of. Like you're an elected official. What do you think you're trying to do? But ultimately, it comes back to so with that, like with that disaster simulation, we give them their individual objectives, but we also say people in your community still have to eat. They still need medicine. They still need to be hydrated, right? So all of this, you still have to think about that common good. And it's funny, the this boy, this is going to sound ageist. I apologize. Like the younger generation, like, when we're doing the simulation with college kids, they get it. Now, some of them, like, they'll still, like, try to win the game, but those of us who are entrenched in our careers, we tend to think in the ways that we have thought about, our job and our role for so long, and we're trying to make sure we're making money, or we're getting reelected, or whatever that job may be. So that alignment really comes when we're able to set down our logos and our egos and say, what is it that is best for this community? What is it best for these survivors right now? Set aside the preconceived notions. Um, and what I love about my job is that I get to be that bridge that brings people together and say, this is the moment when, and this is the mission right now.
I love that. Again, it comes back to higher purpose and really getting people aligned. And I have to imagine when that call does happen outside of like a simulation, when it really happens, I really hope that people like rise to the challenge and think about the greater good.
They do. Yeah. People want to help. They just
They
don't
do.
always know how.
Okay, so question for you, because we talked a lot about people donating physical goods. But what about a donated service? So it could be warehousing, transportation, maybe even technology. I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about what that could look like and how that might actually be more impactful than the physical goods?
Yeah. There's so many, I mentioned we're celebrating 20 years. So we have this wonderful um, list of support that we've worked with people on over the past 20 years, and I've just been doing some reflecting on that. I'm going to talk about a broad example, and then I'll do a couple of very specific things. But I'm so glad that you guys talked to Erica from Feeding America. Incredible organization. And I always think about food banks in disaster. So they operate year round. They're serving their communities. But when a disaster happens, they have pressure from both sides, right? So they have this increased demand from people who suddenly need food assistance who may not have needed it before. They have this increased supply because they have all this generosity of, individuals and businesses who are stepping up and donating supplies and reacting to the moment. Um, but there's all these other things that they need, right? In order to get that donation out to a community. So they need labor and they need boxes to sort those things. They need pallets and they need stretch wrap to stack and, move those things around the warehouse efficiently. They need trucks and drivers to deliver it. So, what happens if you add in a pallet jack or, my goodness, even a forklift to that equation? Suddenly, you've decreased the time it takes for them to move that donation through their warehouse, and you've increased the amount that they can physically do. So, I think about the impact, like, of one can of beans is going to serve somebody for a couple of meals. A forklift or a pallet jack is going to serve them perpetually, you hope, right? And really, it shows up in our metrics as well. Uh, last year after Hurricane Helene, we were moving this donation. I think it was like 10 or 11 pallets of walkers and wheelchairs and medical supplies. It was a short trip. It was going from Atlanta up to the Asheville, Western North Carolina area. All in, I think it cost the company who donated the services probably less than $2,500, like all in, paying their driver, paying for fuel, wear and tear. But that small donation provided $70,000 worth of medical supplies, and it's a triple win. And let me tell you why it's a triple win. And some of this is a little bit of nerd disaster lore.
We're here
But
for
Don't worry,
that.
we had trade nerd, global trade nerd yesterday, so now we're like supply chain disaster nerds. That's
yes,
okay.
Love it.
yes, I love it. I'm an IT geek and a disaster nerd, but fully self-claimed. But so it's a triple win for this community. The nonprofit did not have to pay for that transportation, right? So then they're using those funds so that they can rehab more medical equipment and serve more disaster survivors. The state of North Carolina gets those resources for free for their community members. Oh, and the cost, the value of those supplies and the value of that transportation means that they can actually take that off of their cost share. Like states have to reimburse FEMA anytime comes into their state, so states have to reimburse FEMA. That 72 $2,500 now comes off of their bill from FEMA because it's the value of donated services and equipment. And best of all, like this is where like this is the triple, quadruple, whatever number we're up to when those disaster survivors who lost their medical equipment, they don't have to pay to replacement. They get their mobility back. And gosh, I get emotional thinking about this. And in many cases, they're getting their dignity back, right? At zero cost to them. Um, and I know I said this earlier, but I have the best job in the world, because I get to like I we made a phone call or we sent an email to make that happen. Our role in that was teeny tiny, and then it blossomed from there. I love being that spark that ignites so much good in the world.
Oh, that gave
Sorry,
me goosebumps. Such a good story.
sorry.
So, I don't know if you 2 have watched it. I was watching that documentary on Hurricane Katrina on Net
Just watched
Mm.
that 2 weekends ago, yeah.
think I just, all the different facets, like you talked about, Kathy, like people that were not mobile or, it just all the yeah, it is
It was logistics, and it was interesting because
Yeah.
when that army general, like, kinda came in and took over,
Yes.
he was like, "This is a logistics operation," and I was just thinking like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what what could supply chain professionals do in a situation like that, and
Right.
how could they help?" Yeah.
So so
Yeah.
I actually probably should have included this in my intro, but that's why Alan was created. So, we're 20 years
Uh,
old this year because of
yeah,
Hurricane Katrina.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And supply chain professionals were sitting around at the CSCMP conference that year, and they're walking the halls and they're talking about, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. We can move widgets around the world and we can't get food to the Superdome."
Yeah, the
And
whole Superdome thing, I was
oh,
oh my gosh. I was like, they
yes.
should I'm like, just the whole
It was
efficiency
jaw
of
I mean, it was
getting them in and
jaw-dropping,
out.
made you sick
Oh
to your
my god.
stomach, just yeah.
It was
Everything.
to your point, Kathy, it's yeah, I think I was watching that documentary thinking, gosh, if you'd had the right people, the right skill sets,
Yeah.
Yes.
there's yeah, some of it, yeah, you can't
Yeah.
control, but it was just yeah, that is such a look at that connection.
Yeah. So that's why we're here. Like, I would not
Yeah.
be sitting here talking to you guys today if, like, a bunch of people didn't get in a room together and say, we are the professionals. We're better than this.
Mhm.
We can do so much good in the world. Like, yes, we're
Yeah.
going to use our skills to make money. We're going to, continue. Businesses have to make money if they want to be philanthropic. I get that.
Mhm.
But like, we can do so much good in this world just doing
Yeah.
the same jobs we do every day.
'Cause I was with you, I was shocked to think we live in the United States of America and we couldn't figure that out. Like, I just like, we are way better than that, we should be.
And the
We
ones
are.
who did figure it out, it was like Walmart in the end who's like
Mm.
Walmart, Community Coffee, which is I don't remember who owns them, but there's all these incredible stories of businesses who were getting in there. They were figuring out how to get in there and, help their employees, help their communities. Um, like that was a pivotal moment. It
Yeah.
truly changed emergency management forever. Um, and it
So,
was
Kathy, I think
because
you're gonna answer my question.
oh, sorry.
No, I think
No, go
you're,
ahead.
like, going right there. So I just wanted to, like you're going there. Like, with that, you talking about, "Hey, we got in a room and we said" so as you think about, you are part of several national work groups focused on disaster preparedness, like, what changes or improvements have you seen with supply chain and the government to help build resilience and be more prepared in the future?
Yeah. So it is that integration of private sectors, that recognition that pre-existing supply chains in a community, whether they be for-profit supply chains or nonprofit supply chains, the supply chains that are serving community members day in and day out are the ones that we need to get back in service after a disaster. They're the most efficient. They've been optimized to deliver whatever it is they're delivering in a way that people want. And so we continue to see that push, from across all facets of government, honestly, and nonprofits. Progress is slow, but there have been changes. Like Hurricane Maria, I think is another one of those watershed moments for everybody where we looked at it and went, yeah, it's an island, but how do we have people without power for months? Like
Yeah.
this is it's offensive to me in some ways, like that we allow that to happen. There've been so many after action reports and hot washes and conversations about stuff like this. I was fortunate to be part of this National Academy study that happened where we looked at yeah, actually, we looked at all 3 of the big hurricanes that happened that year, Harvey, Irma, and Maria, but Puerto Rico was so unique, and f because it's an island, FEMA was moving bottled water in on barges and ships because, like, the island needed water. They were without power, and they couldn't treat the water, but had they taken a pause and said, "You know what? The water treatment plant mostly survived, and the bottled water factory is fully intact. They have everything they need, except they didn't have the resin for the caps so that they could close
Oh,
off the water, right?" And so, that, like, one little piece that was missing that those that resin couldn't get on a ship because it kept getting bumped by all this bottled water is just ironic, right? Um, and then you think about, like, all the supporting things, the telecommunications equipment that, the stores could have gotten back online faster, or even just the power people would have been able to coordinate better had we had telecommunications rather than having to worry about satellite. The silver lining, like, in any of this is we do try to learn those lessons so we don't repeat them. And organizations like Allen is we're fortunate enough to have a seat at the table with groups like FEMA and state emergency management groups to really advocate on behalf of good, solid supply chain principles, as it were.
this is just like so much learning. I
I know, it's
feel like I'm
great.
taking this all in. There's so much to learn here. I'm just thinking about like
Yeah.
that resin because we had coworkers whose families went without for so long in Puerto Rico. I'm like, my blood is boiling actually that it was like these caps. You know what I mean? And you're just like, gosh, if you just had the right person at the table to help you understand, like appreciate the barges of water. Yes, that fixes like an immediate need, but like you could have fixed this other thing with just like this one
Exactly.
material. Mm.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about like how do you handle it in the moment and what's going on there, but in your experience, Alan's helping these communities kind of rebuild right after the disaster. What are some of the longer term supply chain challenges that the community might face kind of when it's like it's no longer in the headlines, like we don't hear
Yeah.
about it anymore?
Yeah. Well, you're right about the headlines. 90% of funding that a community is going to get is going to happen in like the 10 days to 2 weeks after disaster.
Mhm.
That's when they're going to raise the most money that's going to have to last for a really long time. So when you think about these back-to-back disasters that we see happening,
Mm.
the community that gets it first probably, they get the beginning of it, but then they get forgotten about. Um and honestly, that 90% of the funding is probably only sufficient for 10% of what those communities are gonna need overall. So after the cameras are gone, Jim Cantori takes off the jacket and moves on to the next community. Um, they still have to figure out how to rebuild, and
Yeah.
there's real social and economic considerations. Some communities do it really well. They think they are thoughtful about how they're going to rebuild. They're thoughtful about, what is the impact on supply chains. I'm going to take a quick aside here because we're actually working in Western North Carolina right now, and we're looking at what supply chains existed. What was the state of supply chains and logistics capacity and capabilities ahead of Hurricane Helene last year. How were they used or how were they not used? And what has happened to them in the year since?
Mhm.
And then how do we help, the local community businesses and the local community nonprofits be better prepared for next time. But not just better prepared and knowing, like, we speak supply chain now, but more along the lines of we know each other, we know what you can do, and let's figure out how to collaborate. So, sorry, that was a quick aside because you're asking about, like, long-term supply chain challenges. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly rebuilding and the challenges that go along with big, bulky building materials. In Western North Carolina, there are all these private bridges that need to be rebuilt, and the state and federal government are not responsible for rebuilding them, right? So these people are, you know, having to take their 4x4 across the ditch now, or take the boat, or whatever it is, how they're getting across this, uh, this, now that they no longer have a bridge, um, and like moving steel beams and plywood and stuff like that. I mean, that's a logistics and supply chain challenge, right? And rebuilding houses, and all of those things are way beyond my area of expertise. Like, I think of things in pallets and boxes and stuff like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and so it's just a different way of thinking about supply chains.
Yeah, those rebuilds that Netflix on Katrina was eye-opening around like kind of how long things lasted, like years. And so I think it is something that like you kind of forget about because it's not in the news anymore. So maybe not so much the supply chain as it is like the local infrastructure and making sure
It
that's getting
is.
rebuilt.
Yeah,
It is.
I thought it was interesting about how they talked about how a lot of professionals left and then never
Yeah.
came back.
Yeah.
So they
Mm,
went to like Atlanta or Houston, and then they kind of got settled, and then you got a new job and career, and so you lost the professional just expertise in those areas as well, which was such a thing. I didn't even think about that. I thought, yeah, if I move, if, my house is gone, everything's gone, you move to a different state, I mean, they were like, some people came back, but some people said, you know what, my life is better here or
yeah.
different, and I'm not gonna go back. So it's
We've
interesting.
uprooted our kids once and put them in a new
Yeah.
school. Yeah.
Yeah.
My business is literally washed away or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth it to uproot
Or
my
they
whole
started a
life.
new business in the new place, and
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
like, so, yeah,
So
what is there to go back to?
So I was at a conference, like, in Atlanta, last year sometime, and they had food trucks set up, and I should probably tell you, I'm from North Louisiana. I grew up in Louisiana, so, like, Katrina always will have a special place for me, but I was at this conference, and they had these food trucks set up, and there was somebody cooking gumbo. And I'm always pretty suspicious about, like, eating Louisiana food when I'm not in Louisiana. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna try it, because like, they had the Snowball place right with them. If you know anything about Louisiana and New Orleans, it's like gumbo and snowballs, right? Um, and so I tried it, and I'm like, this is good. Like, this is legit. And and she's like, yeah, we moved here after Katrina. It's
Oh,
like, we
okay.
just brought our business here after Katrina. And I'm like, okay. So now you've just really maybe made me feel away. So,
Okay, Kathy, as people are listening, what's a small but impactful way that they can get involved in their own communities to help with the disaster preparedness or response for those that want to help? What can they do?
yeah, well, of course, call Alan and work with us, right? I would be remiss if I really didn't say, like, we work across all communities, preparedness, at all times. But, honestly, put your own oxygen mask on first, right? This is
Mm,
the advice they give you on a plane, and it sounds trite, but making sure that your family, making sure that your employees, don't need assistance, if they're prepared, that's gonna allow the government and nonprofit organizations to focus on the people who
mm,
really are truly unable to care for themselves. And then a second thing is really get to know your local emergency manager and your local fire chief. Unfortunately, they're often the same person, because local emergency management is way underfunded. But why do I say, like, get to know them? You want those people to, especially the fire chief, to come into your facility and understand your facility. God forbid there's ever anything that happens and they need to come help you evacuate your plant, but they'll know where things are. They'll have that experience with it. But also, you can help them understand the importance of your business to the community and to the nation. I think about Hurricane Helene, and even Hurricane Irma, or Maria rather, with Baxter plant, and we had saline problems, right? Because they manufactured saline in um, in Puerto Rico, and then, like, in North Carolina, they manufacture saline, same problem, 7 years apart, um, but it's because, like, we didn't prepare those businesses, and we didn't work fast enough to get them back online. Um, so I'll also give one more story, and this is from the ice storms in 2021. HEB, which is a Texas-based grocery chain, um, their road was iced in, and they needed to be able to get trucks in and trucks out. And they don't have heavy equipment, but the county does and the state does. And so their emergency manager at the time called and said, "Hey, can we get some help here?" They're like, "You're not on our route clearance stuff. We'll get to you when we get to you." The guy's like, "Hey, if it's not just us, Walmart's here, Amazon is here, the bread factory is here. If you want people to eat and you don't want to have to give them MREs, come clear it." And they did, right? They realized, oh, okay, this business is important. It's not just that they want to make money. This is not a selfish reason that they want this cleared. It's because they are an integral part of the community and the world.
It's so true, and, gosh, I really hope that, I think about us, we have, we call it, like, our, BCP or business contingency planning, right? In case there's a disaster, like, do we have all the employees' phone numbers? Do we know where we would meet? How would we get back and running? And I really hope that everybody has one of those, and depending on where I've lived, gosh, I lived in India for a little while, and they have a monsoon season, and I tell you what, we activated that plan
Yeah.
3 or 4 times a year,
Yeah.
whereas other plant facilities I worked at, you dusted it off each year, but, like, you didn't have to, thank goodness, didn't have to activate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, we're gonna switch over a little bit to sort of leadership and advice questions. We like to get these insights, from people like you with all your experience. You know, I think anyone in supply chain can feel the pressure, right? People are always calling because something's wrong or late or missing. But I can only imagine that is much more intense during disaster relief. And so, could you share either a key leadership lesson you've learned from those moments? It could be for yourself, it could be maybe something you've witnessed, but something that's just really made a difference and has stuck with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to the pandemic and, you know, when the world shut down, we went to work. And we were literally, I mean, it was literally 16-hour days for about 2 weeks. And at some point, probably, hopefully only a few days in, I realized like I haven't brushed my hair. Like, yes, okay, I showered this morning, but it's just got, it just put it in a ponytail. And and that was the moment. I was like, "Oh, this is really like, self-care is really important." Um, and I made a deal with myself, like, I'm gonna exercise every day, I'm gonna eat well every day, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna shower and and take care of my hygiene. Please don't think that I'm a terrible like, that's a problem for me, it is not, but, um, but that I think that's, like, the job is the job is the job, right? Who we are as people is far more important to that. And we have to take care of ourselves and we have to check in with ourselves and check in with our team. And like I'm so fortunate that I work with young people because like we're able to talk about our mental health in a way that my Gen
Mm.
X brain is not accustomed to, right? It's really refreshing to say like, "Hey, I'm taking the afternoon because I just need to go for a walk. I've got to get away from the computer. I just need to go for a walk." And being able to be real with it. I think that that's just the biggest thing is like the job is still going to be there. If I'm not taking care of myself, I won't be.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's a good
great
one.
reminder.
Okay, I'm gonna read this so I don't mess it up. But you have a quote on LinkedIn that says, "I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." Could you share more about the inspiration for that quote and just anything else that you'd want to share?
Boy, I'm going to try to do this without getting emotional as well. So I took that picture when I went to visit the Dr. Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., probably 15 years ago at this point. And it's actually from his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, in 1964. Like, I will say if you're ever in need of an inspirational quote, go find something,
Yeah.
go read any of Dr. King's speeches
Yeah, he has
because
the
they're
best.
amazing. And so if you think about the time that he was giving that speech is December of 1964. It's the height of the civil rights movement. I mean, he's talking about these terrible things that had happened in Mississippi just the day before. Lynchings and burnings of churches and, killings and just like all of this terrible stuff. And our country was so divided, not unlike now.
Mm,
Um, and Dr. King talked about that division, but he also talked about the hope. And he talked to, I think the quote is something like, he says something about alliances. I don't think he uses the collaboration, but I think he used the word alliances or something like that. Um, and then he talked about his audacious faith in the future of mankind. Um, and talks about, this list of things that he refuses to accept because they are not good for humanity, and they're not good for America, and they're not good for, who we are as humankind. But then he also goes on to list all of these things that he believes. And this is one of the things that he believes is that people everywhere, regardless of race or belief or situation or anything in their past, they still deserve dignity. They still deserve to have a meal and hydration and medical care. And gosh, I just think um that we as people could take a lot from that. Like there's enough food in this world so that no
mm,
one ever need to go hungry, and yet um, we see a lot of terrible things, right?
yeah.
Sometimes the food isn't where it needs to be, right? And so hunger's a supply chain problem. And there's technology to provide clean water for everyone in the world. So hydration is a supply chain challenge. There's so much abundance to us, available to us. Why do we hoard that? Why would we not
Mm,
do that? Why would we not allow people to have that? I will say there's so much to love about Dr. King's speeches, and the primary thing is love, and he talks about love as a way beyond our divisions,
yeah.
and it grips me every time because he talks about love, and he talks about not being. I'm trying to remember how he said it, but he's not the person who is in charge of that. He's just a trustee of that, and it's all of our responsibility. And and there's so many people behind the scenes, so many invisible people who are doing the work, who are making things happen. And I think that's who we are as supply chain people. We're not the people on TV. We're not the people who are out there, but we're using our love and our skills and our capacity to make sure people get the things that they need. And so that's what that quote means to me.
That is like such a beautiful way to wrap this
Yeah.
conversation. I got chill bumps. I'm inspired. I'm proud to be in supply chain.
I didn't plan to cry as part of this
There's
conversation today.
Katie and I are like the new Oprah. We're like, we're gonna
Yeah.
like, get it out of here. But
Brittany.
Kathy, you should be so proud of what you to your point, like, yes, we can all use our skills to just go make money, but you are truly, like, making an impact in people in their kind of worst moment. So this is, like, super inspiring, and, Katie and I love to see people's passion and heart for what they do, and that
Mhm.
just shines through in everything that you said today. So thank you for sharing that with us and our listeners, and yeah, I mean, now we can reach out and see how we can help as well.
I love that, and I
Thank
will
you.
say I have the best job in the world, and, getting to talk about it and getting to thank the people who make that possible, that's what I love.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Kathy.